What's up, Steven? Here we are at lesson number 6. So, this morning I've got quite a few chords here for you. Some of these you may already know. Some of them are kind of like basic 7th chords and stuff, but you asked about 7ths and 9ths and some suspended chords and things like that and how to use them. So, that's the stuff I'm going to give you this morning. It will probably go pretty quick. Some of these chords aren't too hard, and most of them are all movable, so once you learn them kind of in one position, you can slide them all around. And let's see, we're going to be working with the song Working Man Blues by Merle Haggard. That's a kind of a country bar standard in today's world. It's been that way for a while. It's a good song. You and me have probably played it before, I'm sure, at some point in time. So basically the song is just A, D, and E. And I'm going to show you how to use some of these 7ths and 9ths. So we've got our little lesson sheet here. And our very first chord is an A7. And this is in the open position. And it looks like this. Just 2 fingers. Right here. And you can follow right along with that chord diagram I've got here. So my first finger is on the D string on the 2nd fret. And my middle finger here goes on the B string on the 2nd fret, both on the 2nd fret. And the important thing is that the G is open. That's what gives it that 7th sound. That's the 7th degree there. So that's what's giving it that sound. Another thing I'll do sometimes is I'll play the high E string on the 3rd fret here for this chord. So I'm using my pinky there. It kind of looks like my ring finger. See if I can use my ring finger too. So I can kind of go on and off. Or if I just play like a regular old A chord, I usually use just one finger for an A major. I can make it a 7th chord with my ring finger here. Kind of like that. The next 7th chord is another A7, and it's a bar chord, so it's up here. This is a movable chord. And it looks like this. So if you know your bar chords, like this is an A bar chord, like that. If we've got it here, it's the 2nd chord written out. All I'm doing is taking my pinky off. And there's my A7. Just like that. So my first finger is barring all the way across the 5th fret. And I've got my ring finger here on the D string on the 7th. And then my middle finger plays the 6th fret on the G. And that's it. That's our A7 bar chord. And we can slide that around. So like here between 3 and 5, you've got a G7, F7 way down here between 1 and 3, G7, A7, B7. One thing I'd like to do is whenever I'm playing this chord, I'll hammer on with my middle finger. Kind of gives it a cool sound. So our next chord, number 3, is a D7, just a real basic D7 chord up here like this. This one you may already be familiar with. This is a pretty easy, popular, basic chord you see a lot. But the D7 that I like to play is up here, and it looks like this. This is another movable chord. It kind of looks like a C chord. If I were to play a regular C major chord down here and then put my pinky down on the, that's the G string there on the 3rd fret, that's a C7. And then if I were to slide that whole thing up, starting on my 5th fret all the way down to my 3rd fret, so my 5th fret to my 3rd fret, that's my D7 right there. Like I said, this is a movable chord, so you got C7 on the 3rd fret, D7, and it's my ring finger that's naming the chord. So whatever note my ring finger here is on is the name of the chord. So D7, you got an E7 up here. This is a cool chord. F7, back to E7 on my 7th fret, D7 on 5. Just back to an A7 because you can. Our next chord here, we got 2 chords here. This next one, this is a B7. I got 2 versions of a B7. Just like I have with most of these chords. This is the most popular version. It looks like this. And I put a little star next to it here. You can see right here there's a little star next to it. So that's the most popular version of the chord right there. It looks like this. It's the middle finger starts on the A string on the 2nd fret. That first finger, the pointer finger here, is on the 1st fret of the D. And then the ring finger is on the 2nd fret of the G. And then the pinky goes all the way on the very bottom on the high E string on the 2nd fret. And you get a B7. And that's a pretty popular B7 chord. The next chord is another B7, and it looks like this. This one looks a lot like just your regular old, like a B triad chord, a B major chord, however you wanted to play it. Kind of like this. But I'm using 2 fingers here, doing something like this. So I got my index finger on the 2nd fret of the A string, my ring finger on the 4th fret of the D string, and I'm barring here with my 1st finger. And on the B string, I've got the 4th fret with my pinky. And you get this kind of sound. That's a good one. This is a movable chord too, so you can go like B7, up 1 fret is a C7, back to B7. You got another D7 up here, starting on the 5th fret. Again, our index finger here is naming the chord, so we're playing a D note right here. There's a D7. Sounds very similar to this D7. A little bit different, but pretty close. So we got 2 more chords here. Again, this is a 2 very basic chords. We got an E7. Looks like this. If you play just a regular old E major chord, lots of people play it differently. I play it like this. A lot of people play it like that. It doesn't matter how you play it. Basically, all you're doing is you've got 1 finger pushing down the A string on the 2nd fret, and then your 1st finger is pushing down the G string on the 1st fret. And that's it. That's the E major chord. Just 2 fingers. Real simple. And then I'll throw this one in here. I didn't write this one down, but if you take this whole chord right here and you move everything a string towards the floor, so you go like up in pitch, so you're starting now on, you got the D string pushing down here and the B string, that's an A minor 7. Another pretty popular chord, A minor 7. So it's a little, not written down here, but it's a cool one to know. And then our last of the 7th chords is a G7. This one is not one of my favorite sounding 7th chords, but it's a good one to know. It's pretty easy to get to. And basically you start off with like a regular G chord. Lots of people play G chords differently, like this, this, this. Lots of different versions. Basically all you're doing is you're playing a G. I'm doing it like this. I got my ring finger on the 3rd fret of the low E, my middle finger on the B string of the A, or sorry, not the B string of the A, that doesn't make any sense. The 2nd fret of the A string, and then my 1st finger plays the 1st fret down here on our high E string. There we go. That's a G7 chord. That one's kind of cool. I'll use that one, you know, every now and then I'll play that G7 chord. I'll show you how I use it here in a minute. And then our next chords are our 9th chords. So let me show you this one. Again, I don't have this one written down because it's pretty basic and popular. Just the regular old C9 looks like this. If you play a G chord like this, where I'm using all 4 fingers, I got my pinky and my ring finger on the 3rd fret, and then you just move both of these down, you get a C9. You may already know that chord. It's pretty popular. Think like Every Rose Has a Thorn. That's a version of a C9. We're going to do a little bit different 9th chord. So I'm going to show you an A9 chord that sounds like this. So this is between our 4th fret and our 5th fret. So let me walk you through what's going on. I got my index finger here, my 1st finger on the A string on the 4th fret. I've got my middle finger here. I'm actually going down to my G string here on the 4th fret. And then my ring finger is playing the D string on the 5th fret, and my pinky is coming way down here on the B string on the 5th fret. So it might kind of look like a handful, but we've got it written out right here. You can see, so you can follow right along. It's easier to get your fingers all into position, easier to do it than you think it might be. The chord comes out pretty clean when you play it. And I've got a couple different versions of the chords written here. But this is an A9, and this is another movable chord. You can slide it all over the place. So A9 right here. This one's kind of hard to name as far as like where your fingers are at. The way I do it is if I have an A bar chord here, basically I like just drop down 1 fret and then form my 9th chord like that. And I've been playing it for so long that now I just kind of know where my 9th chords are. So that may be something you mess with, is just playing a 9th chord, playing a major chord first and then playing the 9th chord until you can just kind of visualize where your 9th chords are at on the guitar. Especially for this one. The next couple 9th chords I'll show you will be a little bit easier. But this one's cool because you can slide it around. So if you're doing like a slow blues thing, just sliding up and down 1 fret. Or if you want to simulate like a steel guitar, this is kind of tricky, but you can take your 9th chord right here, your A9, and bend all these strings down towards the floor. Kind of tricky to do. It takes a lot of strength. Bend them down and then play them while you release them back up. It sounds like this. Kind of sounds like a lap steel or a pedal steel in a way. Kind of an out of tune pedal steel, but it's kind of got a cool effect. So that's our A9 chord. Another version of the A9 chord is I play the same thing, but I just don't use my index finger. So I'm playing something that looks like this. And usually I switch my fingers around, so I'm using these 3 fingers here. We got this chord written out here as well. It's this one right here, the second A9 chord. And I'll do this kind of stuff. So I'm just like sliding up a whole step, going 2 frets. Maybe a half step down, just 1 fret. That was an A7. All A9, A7. Another A7 down there. So let me show you the D9. So this is another movable chord, as well as both of those 9th chords. I'm sure I mentioned that, but they're both movable chords too. So here's the D9. It looks like this. I got 2 versions of it written out too. This is the proper way to play the D9. It's kind of a tricky one. What I'm doing is I got my middle finger here on the 5th fret of the A string, my index finger on the 4th fret of the D, and then with my ring finger here I'm pushing down E, B, and G, all on the 5th fret. It's kind of a tricky one to get to ring out. But this is the first one we have written down. We got it written down right here, D9. So let me show you this one. This is the one that I like to use. Basically it's the same thing as this, but rather than using my ring finger to push all these strings down, I'm using my ring finger and my pinky, and I'm just not playing my high E string. So it looks kind of like this. And that's a D9, and both of these D9s are movable. So this time our middle finger here is naming the chord, so we're on a D note here, where you get a D9. If we were to come down here, we get a version of a C9, D9, E9, that's an F9, got a G9, keep on going up, you got an A9 way up here. These are cool chords. 9th chords are really cool. And one other one, I don't have this one written down, but I'll do this sometimes. Especially if I'm doing like this kind of rhythm, like I showed you a minute ago. So now I'm going to go to my D9, I'm going to do this. Rather than playing a whole 9th chord, either way, I'm going to play just my E string and my G on the 5th fret, and I'm going to slide them back and forth like this. That's a really simple way to kind of simulate playing a 9th chord. Back to an A9. That time I'm actually pushing down all 3 strings, my G, my B, and my E. Back to A9. You could do an E7 right here, or an E9. Back to another D9, D7, A9, A7, D7, E7, A7. I mean, all sorts of cool little chords. So I've got Working Man Blues written out here, and this song is real simple to follow along. I got it right here. If you don't understand what to read, all these little slashes and what these mean, those are just the beats. So you play A for 4 beats, you play A again for another 4 beats, A another 4 beats, A another 4 beats. Then you drop to D, back to A, E, D, A, and then the whole song just repeats over and over again. So what you can do is you can take these, we have it written out just with our typical like major chords like this. And what we can do is we can substitute all those chords out for 7th chords or for 9th chords, or you know, whatever we want to do with them, and all the different versions of it. So we can do like an A7 here, or we could add that high E string in there. We could play an A7 here. We could do a D7, or even this D7, or if you wanted to, you could come up here and play that bar-shaped D7. All sorts of cool things you can do with it. So the song would sound like this. Well, it's a hard job just to get by with 9 kids and a wife. I've been a working man dang near all my life. A7 up to D7, I keep on working. Monday morning, I'm right back with the crew. A7, gonna go to E7. I drink my beer in a tavern, maybe a D9. Sing a little of these working man blues. Kinda like that. Let's see, let's do an A9. Well, I keep my nose to the grindstone. I work hard every day. On the weekend, I take my pay. I keep on working. Buy my girl a brand new pair of shoes. I don't know all the words. There's an A7, A7. I keep my nose to the grindstone. I sing a little of these working man blues. So I'm just substituting out all of these different 9th chords and 7th chords. So what you can do is just sit here and experiment with them and try them out and see what sounds good. One thing that really sounds good is if you play just your basic major chord, like say you're just playing A, and then right before you change to your next chord, so in this case right before we change to a D, just a couple beats before, I'll go to an A7, then I'll go to my D7, maybe I'll switch it to a D9 right before I switch back to A, then I'll go to an E7, maybe a D, D7, and then back to A. All sorts of cool little things you can do with those chords. So I got 3 more chords right here. Just real briefly, I'm going to touch on these. These are sus chords. I got a couple of them written out here. One is a C sus2. So again, if you know your power chords, your power chord typically looks like this. So this is a C power chord. We got the 3rd fret on the A string. With the ring finger, I'm playing the 5th fret on D, and the pinky, 5th fret on G. That's my like power chord kind of thing. Again, another movable chord. You can take that thing all over the place. But I'm playing it here between 3 and 5. But what I'm doing is I'm barring with my 1st finger, and I'm playing the B and E string as well. So I'm letting these 2 strings here ring out with it. Something kind of like that. That's called a sus2 chord. In this case, it's a C sus2. If we were to move it up a couple frets, we have a D sus2. Or an E sus2. Back to D, C, B, B flat sus2. If we go all the way down, like this, our finger's now off the fretboard or fingerboard here. We have an A sus2. Basically, you're doing this. It's like you're playing an A chord, but with only 2 fingers. It's kind of like an E minor chord, but you just move it down. The next 2 chords here we have are a D sus2 and a D sus4. These are super, super popular. Basically, you start with a D chord. This is D major. You take your middle finger off, and you let that high E string ring open. You get a D sus2. If you play a D major chord, then you put your pinky down on the 3rd fret of the high E string, right below your ring finger, you get a D sus4. Another kind of cool chord. You hear people do that kind of stuff all the time. So just D sus4. Yeah, it's really, really, really popular. Really little popular chords right there. And that's pretty much it for our chords. We've got a song here that'll help you work through this. This is Suzie Q. You may even already know how to play it, but the whole thing is loaded with 7th chords. So real quick, the riff sounds like this. Oh, here we go. I'll do it one more time here for you. That's the end of the riff right there. Then when you start to repeat it, it starts back with that 0. So when I wrote it out, I've got that 0 right there in parentheses. So if you keep on repeating the riff, yeah, this 0 right here is the same as this 0 right there. So as you're playing it, whoop, if I can play it right, that's the end of the riff. Then it starts over. Real slow. Back to my D string open right there. 3. I may even bend that E string just a hair and then start over. And I'm not really letting any of the strings ring out. I'm pretty much muting every time after I play. Whether I'm using this hand or I'm using my picking hand, either one. The chords for it are E7. You play E7 for, let's see, that's 16 beats. So it's oh Suzie Q. E7, oh Suzie Q. Oh Suzie Q. A7, baby I love you. C7, B7, oh Suzie Q. Back to E7. Like the way you walk, I like the way you talk, I like the way you walk, I like the way you talk, oh Suzie Q. You can go back to the riff there. And that pretty much does it. That's our lesson 6. Everything summed up there. So if you have any questions or whatever, let me know. These chords are all pretty simple. Just experiment with them. Basically, kind of the rule of thumb that I follow is, if I'm going to use a 7th chord or a 9th chord, it's usually, well, let me back that up there. The 7th chord has a lot of tension, so if part of the song needs a lot of tension or it's about to resolve back to like the 1 chord or the root chord of whatever key you're in, if you're like in the key of, for example, Workman Blues, if you're in the key of A, the E7 chord here is going to bring you back to an A real nice. So 7ths have a lot of tension in them. 9ths kind of have this mysterious color to them. And kind of the rule of thumb I follow is if it sounds good, it is good. So if you try it out and use a 7th chord in a situation and it doesn't sound very good, don't use it. Or if it does sound awesome, go for it. So that's it. If you have any questions, let me know. Text me, call me, send me a message, whatever you need. And we will see you later.